Hey, thank you so much for joining today's episode. My name is Matt O'Connell, and you've tuned in to Spoken Truth Revolution. Today, we have a couple stories. President Trump has been exonerated once again from the lying media's allegations of his famous Bible photo op in front of St. John's Church last year. Secondly, we have flip-flop Fauci was proven wrong once again about his hydroxychloroquine treatment to help COVID patients. And then third, parents are revolting against school boards because of their far-left, transgender, and critical race theory curricula. So for this next article, we have an article from ABC News that is actually a follow-up article from a year ago. And the article that was written on June 9th, 2021 states, police did not clear Lafayette Park area so Trump could hold Bible photo op, Watchdog. So it looks like the Watchdog organization did some investigation on that famous photo op with Trump. As you may remember last year when all the riots were going on with Black Lives Matter, with Antifa, with the left, supported by the Democrats, supported by the media, supported by social media, supported by the CDC. They said, hey, you can't go to church, but you can go out and burn a city down. In other words, right? They didn't really say that, so don't fact check me. What they did say is that the racial tension is a public health crisis, and they valued and supported going out to protest on behalf of George Floyd. But they did not condemn the riots and the burning down of cities. That is a fact. So needless to say, what we have here is, as you probably guessed, another lie from the media. And as you know, they lied and lied and lied about President Trump. They lied from Russian collusion. That's been proven false. They lied about his statements on the Charlottesville attacks. That was a lie. They said that he supported and stated that there were good people on both sides, and they interpreted, meaning the media and the left and the Democrats interpreted that as being, oh, he supports the KKK and white supremacy. If you look at the transcript, that did not happen. He did not say that. He said he condemned the neo-Nazis and the KKK, but there were good people on both sides, where it was a mixture of people who valued history, who wanted to support history, but also good people on the other side of the coin who wanted to change and be a more progressive voice for the culture. So again, time after time after time, it seems like more and more of these types of stories are correcting themselves, but they fly under the radar. They push the initial story so hard and for so long, for months, and they were condemning Trump, and then all of a sudden a year later, under the radar, they say, oh, we're going to make a slight correction. We found out some more information, and we found out some actual truth and objectivity with this, and actually Trump never said that, or Trump never did that, or the investigation proved otherwise. This is one of those stories once again, and it proves that the left, the media, and the Democrats, they have been lying the whole time. Even with the lockdowns and the pandemic, and with COVID, and with the death tolls, and with the case numbers, and with the efficiency of the lockdowns, which the lockdowns didn't do anything. It just destroyed the economy. That's really the only thing that the lockdowns did. So anyways, it seems like time and time again, for the major stories that the media is pushing, they have a narrative initially, and then about a year later, they have to correct it. And again, I get fired up because we should be wanting truth to prevail in our society. And as Christians and folks who have conservative values, we should hold truth to be so valuable, and we should all want to pursue truth in such a way where we can then precisely execute judgment and justice and fairness once we know the truth. But if we are so emotionally driven by our feelings and anger, that can blind us from conducting true justice in our society. So let's read the headline. So the first headline states this. It states, and this was written on June 4th, 2020, so almost exactly a year ago. Trump calls tear gas reports fake news, but protesters' eyes burned just the same. and the White House denies it was used to clear protesters before his photo op. So you may remember when it's probably going to be in history books now, probably not in history books in a good way, in a truthful way, but it has Trump holding up a Bible in front of the St. John's Church in Washington, D.C. And you may remember that image. And the biggest fuss about that particular image was that the left were saying Trump used his Gestapo, his military to push away and pay and spearhead through the peaceful protesters to get this photo op and to basically support and maintain his white supremacy, blah, blah, blah. Bunch of lies. It really is. And they actually corrected themselves. ABC News. A year later, no one's probably going to talk about this other than a few outlets such as Daily Wire, maybe Fox News, Breitbart, etc. You won't hear this from any mainstream outlet. This won't even be on any nighttime news anchor shows or anything like that. This will not be talked about. But this story a year ago was talked about. It was pushed for about maybe 2 to 3 months even. And so you may remember all the riots going on last year with Black Lives Matter, Antifa, setting up autonomous zones, burning down businesses, destroying cities, namely Democratic cities in which Democratic mayors did nothing about. They stepped aside. They allowed the riots and the protests to continue without any repercussions. You had VP of the United States, Kamala Harris, supporting the bailouts and sharing the GoFundMe URLs on Twitter to help the bailouts for the violent protesters, violent rioters, I should say. And you had the media spinning everything, calling everything, oh, this is largely peaceful protests, while literally, I remember there was an image you probably remember. I think it was a CNN reporter, and he had goggles on his head, and he had a scarf around his neck, and he's saying, yeah, this is a largely peaceful protest, while there's a burning building behind him. Like, come on, you can't bull crap a bull crapper, if you know what I'm saying. So needless to say, that was going on. That's the context. As you remember, you probably don't even need, you could probably share the information on this podcast better than I can. But again, this particular incident where Trump was holding up a Bible and then the media pushed that he had his Gestapo, push through the peaceful protesters, dispersing them. And there's all these images of, on this particular article where people crying because there's tear gas, pepper spray in their eyes, and their friends are, squirting water bottles in their face, and there's smoke. The images don't provide a truthful narrative. And so yesterday, this article came out, June 9th, 2021, from ABC News. And it says this: police did not clear Lafayette Park area so Trump could hold the Bible photo up. Watchdog, and the Watchdog organization found this information out. It then says Trump claimed the Inspector General's report totally exonerated him. And it says this: U.S. Park Police did not clear Lafayette Park and nearby area of the protesters on June 1, 2020. So President Trump could walk from the White House over to St. John's Church, but learned of his interest in surveying the site hours after they had begun planning to clear the area to put up new fencing, according to the new Watchdog. So this is providing the news story. So now it's paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4. So for the fifth paragraph in provides actual objectivity. I'm not even going to read. You can read this article for yourself. The first 4 paragraphs are like, well, you remember when the rioters were, the Secret Service was deployed against the rioters. So it's like talking about it's like this combative little battle that occurred at Lafayette Park, and it was all Trump's fault. Everything's Trump's fault. But then it says this in paragraph 5: the office of Watchdog also concluded that the park police officers acted within their authority to begin clearing Lafayette Square and nearby before the city's 7 p.m. curfew, a move that was widely criticized at the time, having blah, blah, blah. So in short, really what that says, without the additional commentary by these two writers from ABC, Stephanie Ebbs and Benjamin Siegel, um, in short, the police were already moving these protesters who were violating the curfew because the night before they were burning down Washington, D.C. They burned down the St. John's Church that Trump held that quote unquote Bible photo op. They burned down other buildings, destroying vehicles, destroying businesses, destroying law enforcement equipment, so on and so forth. And so they instituted a curfew at 7 p.m. And that is why the police were pushing the rioters to basically saying, go home. The curfew is in place. Go home. They weren't going home. And therefore, because they were now violating the law and the mandates at that time, they were basically being forced to go home because they were not following the law. And that is the objective truth based on this report that came out. And the reason why I'm emphasizing this particular article is because, again, we should always wanting to pursue truth. And if we are wrong based on an initial presumption of a situation, and we have an assumption based on something that happened today, and then a week later, a month later, a year later, we found out that our assumption was wrong way back when, we should be humble and say, listen, I was wrong. I didn't know the facts at the time, and we should have those discussions. But the left doesn't want that. The media doesn't want that. Frankly, the Democrats don't want that. Unfortunately, it's only conservatives and conservative Christians that are wanting to pursue truth in an objective manner, and we need to wake up. And if you're left leaning and you're listening to this, I hope and I pray that you wake up to wanting to pursue truth, because truth not only benefits the person that may be exonerated in that particular case, which they should be. No lie or gossip should accuse and find someone guilty. Someone should be found guilty based on truth, and that is true justice, and that is true equality and fairness. People should not be judged based on assumptions, allegations, but we should allow due process to unfold, investigations to happen, and for the truth to prevail. Any type of suppression of truth, according to Romans 1, as I read in the last podcast, is a work of the devil, even if it includes some truth, if it is suppressing other truth. So you may have some pieces of evidence that may occur, that you may have to evaluate a situation, and then other pieces that, I don't want to include those pieces of truth because it would actually ruin my narrative. That is not pursuing truth, and that is not biblical. It is not what God wants, and it's not what we should want as moral people either. So keep speaking truth and share this information, because this was a huge story a year ago. Share this particular story, new story from ABC News, correcting the record that Trump did not clear out Lafayette Park, because truth matters. So here's another story that the media is absolutely burying. So it's an update related to Fauci's emails, as promised. This is, as I mentioned in one of the prior podcasts, the Fauci emails were released, and it really shed light on some of his potential conflict of interest with China, and also just flip-flopness. Like I mentioned, I've designed these amazing flip-flops. They're beautiful. They're white flip-flops with Fauci's face on them, and they're perfect for a summer barbecue or just hanging out with your friends at the beach. Flip-flop Fauci. But this title from BizPackReview.com, emails reportedly show Fauci was informed on success of hydroxychloroquine in early 2020. So, you as just a common sense individual, you remember about a year ago when there was a lot of discussion. Obviously, the pandemic was coming into full swing, 2 weeks to slow the spread, or, just wear a mask for another month, or actually, we're going to be in lockdown for 6 months, whatever the case is. The pandemic, we've discussed this particular topic many times, and we're coming to find out that you, with the common sense, like myself, we were right the entire time. And you remember specifically the hydroxychloroquine argument. You remember that obviously, we had COVID-19 patients who were being really affected by COVID-19, especially the elderly and those with comorbidities. But then we had some other doctors that came out that were going against the mainstream, I'll do quote unquote scientific elitist doctors who were promoting this drug, hydroxychloroquine. And what was happening to those doctors? Do you remember? Do you remember they were being censored? They were being suspended from Twitter. Their accounts were being completely removed from Twitter. Their doctors' license and license to practice medicine at times were actually being revoked based on the state that they were living in. They were being flagged as fake news, mocked by the scientific community that was leaning on the left side of the aisle, clearly political side of the aisle for sure. But now, this article was written on June 4th. The truth is once again coming out. And so the article starts, How the Mighty Have Fallen. Receipts don't lie. In a batch of Freedom of Information Act's emails released this week are the gift that keeps on giving. At least for the next couple months, I would say, is a lot to go through. The latest revelation pulled from the emails proved Dr. Anthony Fauci lied about his knowledge of the life-saving coronavirus treatment, hydroxychloroquine. Studies published last year proved the drug was effective at cutting the death rate of those infected with the coronavirus. Former President Trump, having had the virus himself, touted the drug as an effective way to treat the more severe symptoms of the virus many times. So it says studies published last year, and it's a hyperlink to a henryford.com. And the henryford.com article is a doctor. It's a picture of a doctor. I'm trying to find it. I can't find his name, but the article starts with treatment of hydroxychloroquine cut death rates significantly in COVID-19 patients. Henry Ford Health Systems study shows. And so what it indicates is that in a large-scale retrospective analysis of 2,541 patients hospitalized between March 10th and May 2nd, 2020, across the system's 6 hospitals, the study found 13% of those treated with hydroxychloroquine alone died compared to 26.4% not treated with hydroxychloroquine. None of the patients had documented serious heart abnormalities. However, patients were monitored for a heart condition routinely pointed to as a reason to avoid the drug as a treatment for COVID-19. It continues, patients treated with hydroxychloroquine at Henry Ford met specific protocol criteria as outlined by the hospital system's Division of Infectious Disease. The vast majority received the drug soon after admission, 82% within 24 hours and 91% within 48 hours of admission. All patients in the study were 18 or over with a median age of 64 years. 51% were men, 56% African American. So this was a study, and it shows, just to highlight those percentages, if they got the treatment, 13% of those treated with hydroxychloroquine died. If they didn't have hydroxychloroquine, 26.4% died. So almost almost 100% increase from 13% to 26.4%, comparing those two percentages. If they started the hydroxychloroquine process or they did not. And that is tens of thousands of people that could have been saved if this particular information was not censored by social media, by the quote unquote, I'll call it science fiction community, because it really is. They're just a political. Dr. Fauci is a politician. The entities and organizations that he represents and that he leads from a strategic standpoint are political entities. They are not based on science. They are not based on objectivity, clearly. And this is a quote from Dr. Fauci when the hydroxychloroquine option was becoming more, it was the early stages, before everything was getting censored, when a doctor came out about hydroxychloroquine. So he says the answer is no. The evidence you're talking about, based on hydroxychloroquine, is anecdotal evidence. The information that you're referring to specifically is anecdotal. It was not done in a controlled clinical trial, so you really can't make any definitive statement about it, he said at the time. But, if it has if it doesn't, if as we talked about this, and you probably talked about this and read many articles about it as well, if hydroxychloroquine didn't have many negative side effects, then why not try it? Why not try it and give some people a sense of hope that there is some type of treatment that they could potentially do in order to survive COVID-19, right? It says this further on in the article. Prior to the pandemic, hydroxychloroquine had been used safely for 65 years in millions of patients. Thanks to Flip-Flop Fauci's campaign against the treatment, tech giants began censoring those who advocated for it on their platform. So again, I think as we learn more, and why am I sharing this additional story? Because again, when you read the news or you watch the news or you hear something or read something that your friend is sharing, always ask yourself, what are the sources in the article? Is the article highlighting allegations? Are they alleging something? Or are they providing actual objective sources to prove the point that the article or news primetime show is trying to push? Because as we're seeing more and more often than not, the articles and the shows, they're pushing a narrative, they're pushing an agenda, and more often than not, they're usually lying about it. They usually have to correct the record. And when they correct the record, the correction flies under the radar. So most people don't even read and don't even realize that what they were thinking about in this case, about Trump, his photo op with the Bible, about hydroxychloroquine, they're just kind of stuck in that realm of lies. But now we know the truth. So continue to push truth. Seek out the facts, seek out the evidence, and let the truth and let the evidence steer you to how you should believe and how you should look at a situation. Yeah.